Hello friends, in this video you will understand who the stakeholders of a project are and what they do, how you should be and you should plan the engagement with them throughout the life cycle of the project. Who is a stakeholder? A stakeholder is somebody who has an influence on the project or who is influenced by the project. Sometimes they may not be influenced by the project, but they may perceive to have got an impact by the project. Even such stakeholders, such people are also stakeholders of the project. Now, you have to engage with them. You may ask why. Why should I engage with them? You should engage with them because what do you need ultimately? You want success in the project. You want to satisfy the customers. You want to get the end goal, whatever it is, the product, service, results, whatever it is. You have to get there, right? In order to get there, you cannot work alone. You have to work with people, and these people are your stakeholders. What is the kind of quality that you have to show towards them? You have to certainly show honesty, integrity, collaboration, respect. All these qualities are necessary for you to be able to succeed in your targets. You may ask, when should I engage with these stakeholders? The engagement starts right from the beginning of the project. You will have to, first of all, identify your stakeholders, right? That has to happen at the start of the project, and you have to do the needful planning, right? That would obviously be at the start of the project. But then it has to be done throughout the project. Why? Because the project progresses as it goes, and when it progresses, it elaborates. At the start of the project, you may not know everything, right? When it progresses, you will know things and you will understand who your stakeholders will be at each stage for each activity. When you get closer, you will know better. So at the start of the project, you will not be able to identify all the stakeholders. The stakeholder identification should begin at the start but should continue throughout the project. In a project setup, there are stakeholders, is what I said, right? Now, that concept may be a bit vague for some of you. So I'm going to dig in and give you many examples of who the stakeholders are in your project. First of all, your team. The set of people in your team are your stakeholders, and they are your closest stakeholders in terms of implementing the work because you may interact with them on a daily basis. So the BAs, the developers, the testers, um, all those stakeholders will be the primary stakeholders, and they are in the, imagine they are in your first circle, very closest to you. And next level will be the stakeholders who support you, like PMOs, for example, the governing body, steering committee, sponsor. They are not exactly within, but they are supporting you. And the next level will be the suppliers, the regulatory bodies, the end users, the customers. You don't interact with them on a daily basis, but then you have to be very, very careful. You have to monitor them. You have to make sure that they are happy. They are the next closest level to you. So all these are the different types of stakeholders that you interact with during the project in a project kind of a setup. Life cycle of a stakeholder engagement. I prefer to call it an engagement and not a management because engagement is slightly closer. You interact, treating them to be at the same level as you. Stakeholder engagement, the different phases in the stakeholder engagement. The first phase that you can imagine is the identification phase. First of all, you have to identify who your stakeholders are. How will you identify? You talk to the people, the initial people that you, that those who assign you the responsibility of the project management. You go to the project charter, you look at the different things, and you try to understand who the stakeholders might be. Obviously, the identification process, as I said before, will not end at the start. It will happen throughout, as you progress with the work. But then initial identification has to happen at the start of the project, which is the project inception phase. Now, the analyzing of stakeholders. So you know that these are the stakeholders that you need to work with. Now what you have to do is to analyze the stakeholders. There are different ways in which you can analyze the stakeholders, and I'm going to cover that a bit later in this video. So you have to analyze, understand the impact that these stakeholders could cause on your project. And the next thing is devising a strategy. Now you analyzed, yeah, you came to know that this stakeholder is very important. He's not supporting me. And there's a situation, right? There's a case for each stakeholder. Now you have to come up with a strategy so that you improve that relationship. Or maybe you don't give that much attention because that particular stakeholder is not important. You devise whatever strategy it is, either to improve or to kind of tone down a little bit. That is called coming up with a management strategy, which is the third part. Yeah. And then you have to review, revise, revisit the stakeholder engagement throughout the life cycle of the project. Right. So, as I said at the beginning and throughout the project is when the stakeholder engagement has to happen. In this slide that you see here, I'm talking about the salience model. It is a model that describes your stakeholders based on their power, based on the urgency, and based on the legitimacy. So there are three circles here, and you see these mentioned in the three circles. What you do is you put your stakeholders into these circles so that you know who is the most powerful stakeholder, who is the legitimate stakeholder, urgent stakeholder, and the common of both, and the intersection of all the three. So you kind of put them into different categories. So you understand who the dominant stakeholders are, who the demanding stakeholders are, who the discretionary stakeholders are, and who the core stakeholders are, those dependent, those dangerous. So the way to analyze is salience model. Here is another way in this slide that tells you how you can prioritize your stakeholders and how you can engage with the stakeholders. If you look at this graph, you see interest level on the x-axis and influence and power level on the y-axis. Now let's say the interest level of a stakeholder is very low and the influence or the power that they have is very low. Then how much time you should spend on this stakeholder? Not much. You just have to monitor, make sure that they are not impacting adversely, unknowingly. But the time that you spend, the interest that you show is very minimal. You don't have to spend a lot of energy on this kind of stakeholders. So it's only monitoring these stakeholders that is required. Now let's say the interest level has increased. Yeah, the stakeholder is very interested. He or she wants to know everything that's happening in your project, but then they don't have an influence or they don't have power, right? Such stakeholders could come to your rescue when you need them because their interest level is very high. So these stakeholders should be kept informed of what is happening in the project. The next kind of stakeholders are those who have high power, high influence, but they don't have much interest on your project. What should you do? You should make sure you keep them satisfied because you may need their support. Why? Because they are very powerful, they have high influence. So keep them satisfied. The fourth and the most important kind of stakeholders are those who have high interest and high influence on the project, and those are in the red category here. You need to manage closely. You have to maybe engage with them every single day, find out a strategy that best suits for these kind of stakeholders. So those are the stakeholders who can have maximum impact on your project. So be very careful with these stakeholders, hence they are shown in red here. We have spoken about the influence and power level and interest level, right? But there can be other things like the attitude of the stakeholders, the belief, the expectations, based on which you may have to categorize these stakeholders. Yeah, so there are other factors also, but these are the most important ones that you could use to categorize your stakeholders and decide how you should be with them. This slide here shows you SEAM. SEAM stands for Stakeholder Engagement Assessment Metrics. Just look at it. It's an example that is shown here, and you could make similar SEAM models for you. So there are different stakeholders that are written on the left side in the stakeholder column. And what do you see on the right side? You see the different levels of interest they have. Some, they are not even aware of your project. Yeah, some are resistant. They are aware, but they are a little resistant. Some are neutral stakeholders. They are neither resistant nor supportive, neutral kind of stakeholders. Some are supportive stakeholders. They do support the project, and they do support the way that you are organizing and taking this project forward. Leading stakeholders, it's the highest category. So there are different levels here, and what you do here is, for each stakeholder you look at how much they are engaging, how they are, and then decide whether they are unaware or they are supportive, based on how they are. So you have to identify their current engagement level, and you have to identify the desired engagement level. The current level may be less than the desired engagement level. In that case, you will have to come up with a strategy to improve yourself so that it gets to the desired level. Sometimes it will be higher. The current level will be higher than the desired level. In that case, tone down a little bit, spend a bit less time, understand where you can reduce and optimize your time with such stakeholders. So this SEAM model shows you how you can put put different stakeholders in different categories, and then see how you need to work on based on the current engagement level and the desired engagement level that you foresee. Now, you know that you have to work in a collaborative manner with these stakeholders. You may ask, how am I going to do this? Right? And this slide shows you how you can do this. The mode of engagement can be verbal or it can be written. Let's say it is verbal communication. Even within verbal, it could be formal communication or it could be informal communication. Informal communication, maybe when you see a stakeholder at the coffee machine and you just talk to him or her about what's happening and apprise that person. Those are informal communications. You don't have to kind of log them anywhere or save the MOM or anything. You just do it in a casual manner, verbally. Verbally formal communication comes through presentations in meetings, the reviews of the project, the briefings, the brainstorming that you do, the project demos. These are all serious kind of interactions, right? And they are verbal interactions. So those are the verbal, formal and informal kind of interactions. Now coming to non-verbal interactions. You don't actually talk to somebody literally, but you do the talking through other means. It's the written mode. How do you do it in a written mode? You send a progress report, or you prepare a project document, or prepare a business case. That's the written way. There are informal ways also, like you just jot down some notes, you send an email, or You send a message in social media. Those are the informal way of written communication. There is a push communication and a pull communication, and also an interactive communication. Push communication is where you send an email or you send a notification or a memo. Pull is where you read, you search, you understand, you get the information from the right stakeholder. Those are pull. You're getting the information. Interactive is where you are engaging with people in meetings, in brainstorming, or in a demo, or for different purposes. You kind of engage with them, and that is interactive mode. They give information, they speak, you speak. It's an interactive mode of communication. So these are the different stakeholder engagement modes. So my friends, what's your ultimate target? The ultimate target is to make sure that the stakeholders who are supporting you already continues to support you and helps you for the fulfillment of your goals. Those who are not supporting, make sure that they are not impacting your project adversely, because they could become dangerous. So manage them in such a way that they don't become dangerous or cause a negative impact to your project. So look at both sides of the stakeholders and engage them in the right way. Wish you good luck.